as you're burning your tongue.
It's burning my tongue.
We're live here in I don't know how much live you're going to be after that hot coffee.
I didn't expect it to be that hot.
So we're on episode 95. I had discussed this. We're 5 episodes away from 100 episodes of Reels and Heels. Can you believe that? No?
No.
Is your tongue still burning?
Yes. I have the worst timing ever.
Worst timing ever. I know usually you're like trying to fix your makeup or...
Well, if I didn't have to work and then do a million other things, then I would always be ready, but I'm not.
So today we have a really cool comic creator, D Fish, joining us.
Hello.
And then Sarah White, who dabbles in comics, but mostly behind the scenes. So how you guys doing?
I'm doing good. How's everyone else doing today?
Besides your tongue burning? Doing great.
Besides that, we're good.
So D, you want to go ahead and kind of introduce yourself? When did you get started doing comics?
That's one of those things where it's an easier question to ask. When was I not into doing comics? Because there's very few of those years involved. I mean, I was like a lot of kids making comics super young age, creating characters and making my own. I did comic strips when I was 8 years old, and I'd put them up on the bulletin board in my grade school. So I'd say professionally, I started doing like the world's smallest distribution of, I would go to a Staples and print out my books and, give them to 4 people in the early 90s. But I did my first online comic in 2001, which was called Dandy and Company. And that ran until 2018. And I've done a ton of stuff since then. I did a graphic novel series, Wellkeeper, another strip called Marjorie of the Weirdlings. I did a 6-issue series called Carpe Noctem for #comics. That was a lot of fun. And recently, my two bigger projects have been, I've been the artist on the weekly online comic, Giant Girl Adventures, and then my own semi-autobiographical webcomic, Finding D, since 2017.
Yes, nice. And that's a Kickstarter that you're doing right now, right? Volume 1?
Yep, it's the color collection. The strip's been out since 2017, and there have been little black and white collections, and individual issues and stuff like that. But yeah, with Unlikely Heroes Studios, we're putting together a color collection for the first time. So these are strips that I've never seen in color. That our wonderful artist Katie Rooston is doing the colors for, and it's the weirdest thing in the world to see these comics that I drew 5 or 6 years ago being colored for the first time. And I'm like, on one hand, it's like, wow, that's so awesome to see. On the other hand, I'm like, oh God, my line work has gotten so much better.
Yeah, the things. I know people are fans of black and white comics. I mean, if you look at Ninja Turtles when they first came out with black and white, The Walking Dead is a black and white comics. So like just the things that color adds to comics. What's the word I'm trying to look for? It broadens like what you're looking at.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was in one of Scott McCloud's books. I think it was in Understanding Comics, and this is not a direct quote because I haven't read that book in years, but he made a point of how I think, I could be misquoting this entirely. This could be attributed to someone else entirely, but it was something along the lines of how black and white art is the art. You see the lines and the shapes and the forms, and you see what they are, but when you add color, things become things. Like that drawing of a desk lamp just becomes a desk lamp. That drawing of a car where you're thinking about the lines and the construction of them becomes a car. It makes them less abstract and more things. And I think the more realistic anything gets, the less the brain has to try to get past the suspension of disbelief or the I think that's one of the reasons why, like CGI animated movies have eclipsed the box office of the classic 2D animated stuff, because your average person doesn't have to take that extra mental step to translate what they're seeing into things. They're not drawings anymore, they're things. They look like the things they're supposed to look like. The more real they get, the less your brain has to interpret and say, oh, this is and of course you get too close, you get into the uncanny valley and all that nonsense. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. And for those that are listening and watching here, this is Finding D, Volume 1. This is the colored one that's on Kickstarter. You have like, what, 8 days left?
Something like that, yeah.
Like 9 days.
I'll reenact it.
So how did this come together? You want to go ahead, Sarah? Is this something that you want to talk about?
Well, I think that D, you and Lori must have been friends, and then must have been just a thing where y'all got to talking about it, and then the next thing, what the first I knew of it was Lori saying, "Hey, what do you think about us publishing this?" And I'm like, when have I ever said no to something that you thought was a good idea? Because as we all know in the indie comics industry, if Lori Foster says that she thinks it's a good idea, then it's probably a good idea. And I'm sitting here going, I've never disagreed with any title that she's ever considered adding, because they're always good. And D's is great.
Now, I may be speaking out of school here since Lori isn't here, but she has said as much on other podcasts we've done, so hopefully I won't be getting in trouble. But she mentioned on one that she was reluctant to approach me for a little while when it came to publishing with the comic stuff, that she had wanted to but hadn't quite pushed that button yet. And when I'm working also on a series of werewolf novels. It's just something I started during the pandemic, and I'm like 6 deep into this series of books, and I needed an editor because me am no word good. Yeah, I'm the typo queen. I am the run-on sentence queen. All these things, and it's so, I was talking to Lori about that, and she did a little sample of the first chapter. It's like, oh, it could be like this, and we talked about price and all that. And she's been editing. She edited the entire first book. She's about a quarter of the way in on the second book, and a few weeks after getting started with that, we started talking about other comic stuff, and that's when her and I started talking about bringing Finding D in. It was very, very much testing the waters of the professional relationship with the editing before she started talking to me about the comics. I could be misremembering this, and she may be like, "Why did you give my secrets away?" But I feel safe.
What is the story behind Finding D?
Okay. So, like I said, I've been making comics for years. When I came out, I was still working on Dandy and Company, and in Dandy and Company, it was very much kind of like a Looney Tunes meets Peanuts meets Garfield kind of comic strip, funny animals, and a little bit of DuckTales because they'd get into big epic adventures. Funny animals kind of stuff. And I'd been doing that for years. I loved working on it, but I would often interject as the cartoonist. So I would appear in the strip for years, ever since the beginning. Every now and again, every few weeks, there'd be some appearance of the cartoonist, and so I came out in the strip to the character, and just kind of moved on from there. That was one of the ways I'd come out. And so I had, the friends that stuck with me through it all would keep saying things like, "Oh, D, you should, make a comic about coming out. You should make a comic about coming out. Oh, you should make a comic about, all these different things." And so at the time, Finding D was a blog. It was just a regular written blog that I was writing in order to kind of have a little bit of therapeutic venting about some of the crap that I'd get, going out, with, you know, the rise in all this hysteria over bathrooms and all that stuff. It had become really dramatic really fast. And so I was writing this blog where I was just kind of venting, figuring, oh, well, it'll make me feel better to vent. Oh my God, it so didn't. It made me feel like crap to vent. I'm not the kind of person who can vent their emotions and then they feel better. The more I dwell on it by putting them down on paper, the stronger they get. And I was making myself more depressed. Or I hate my chair; it's very uncomfortable. Like I'm going to keep shuffling the entire show. So I was doing this blog, and it just turned into this vitriol. I was just spewing my anger at the words, and it wasn't helping. And to the degree that I was like, I got to stop doing this. This is hurting my mental health. And then I thought about all these people that had told me, you know, D, you should make a comic about coming out, you know? And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm having these experiences. A lot of them are negative experiences. A lot of them are just things that are happening, things I'm discovering, things that are, you know, for your average 12-year-old girl, there's stuff they're learning. You know, for me, I was at the time 41 and learning this stuff for the first time. Like, we make a comic out of that. And instead of trying to make a long form dramatic comic, I'm like, let me just do it as a comic strip. I can do them 1 week at a time, whenever I feel like it, see if people like them. Who knows? It was a lark. It wasn't something I ever thought was going to be anything. And you can see it. If you look at the earliest strips, there was no model sheets. I was just making it up as I went. It took me months before I had an idea of how I wanted these characters, which were me and my partner Heidi, to look. And our dog. It was pretty much the main cast. So I started doing these little strips kind of about, you know, everyday life things that were happening to me. And to my surprise, people really reacted. People really responded. I was getting a lot of, you know, very positive feedback from it. And more than anything else, by sharing my personal experiences, you know, I'm coming out. I'm at the time 41 years old, and I'm trying to come out as transgender. Instead of thinking I'm going to be, oh, well, these experiences are going to be so completely alien because my brain is at that time not thinking about it in the bigger picture. Instead, what I'm getting are these experiences from, you know, from women all over saying, oh my God, yes, that's so me too. And it's turned into this thing where a lot of these experiences, while they may be specific to my experience, have turned out to be kind of universal. And the main thing, I gave myself a mandate when I started the strip, was that always try to find a punchline. Always try to find a way to laugh at whatever situation is happening in the strip, no matter how you know, it may be, you know, I did a strip about this one, and I don't even think it's in the book. It comes later, where we had gone to the movies and I had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the movie, something fierce. So I had to go out. And I had a panic attack trying to go to the bathroom because there was about 7 teenage girls standing in front of the bathroom door, just laughing and snickering. And it was just, I was like, there was no way I was going to work up the nerve to walk past them through that door. I was so nervous. I walked to the other end of the mall to use this bathroom in this dark corner of nowhere. And I'm like, okay, there's definitely a strip in there. And you know, there are movies where I've held it the entire time, just being like, nope, not going to do it unless I can go with Heidi and I've got my backup and no one's going to, you know, cause problems or anything like that. I'd make strips about that where it'd be like, I'm complaining about the entire time. And Heidi's like, you know, the movie's over. Really? So yeah, a lot of it was just trying to find humor in those everyday situations, because my thinking was, if cartoon me can find humor in these situations and find ways to laugh at these situations that are causing me anxiety, then maybe real me can as well. And in that regard, it has actually been very therapeutic. And it's helped me get past a lot of stressors that were running my life early on.
I want to say I'm sorry, you know, of all the real life stuff that had happened. But I applaud you for the way that you told your story. I think that's really cool. I know Nicole is in the community as well, and she dealt with her herself.
No, I don't think I dealt with it.
Well,
I didn't
like-
deal with anything till I was 40.
Right, but inside there was a
Yeah, it was
fight.
always,
Yeah.
I always just told myself, I'm like, I'm not. It's a non thing. Like it's just the, thing you don't talk about. I mean, I think if people knew me well enough, they knew already, but it wasn't something that I went and said. And finally I was like, you know what? I'm too old for this. Like, this is who I am. And if you don't like it, tough. Like,
And this was what, 40, right? 40.
yeah. It's like, I'm not going to lie well, I never lied. Like, I don't think I ever lied about it. I just think that I never really said anything about it. Now I just embrace it and say, well, you don't have to like it.
Well, I think that's how everybody should be. Like, they should embrace who they are. Because if you don't embrace your true self, and it's just even outside of the community, just embrace who you are. I think you'll live a much happier life.
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely say that I've got plenty of external sources of stress. I still get, shitty looks when we go to the store or the restaurants or whatever. But it's amazing that all these things didn't happen before I came out. Before I came out, I was so functionally invisible that it was so easy for me to just wander around someplace. People would literally walk into me. And it was funny because at the time I had green hair, I'm 6'2", and people would walk into me that I was so invisible. But now that, I'm not invisible anymore, people absolutely notice. There's a lot of people who will look at me and give me the crappy glares and all that jazz, but wouldn't trade it. I haven't had a single day in the last 7+ years where I've thought to myself, I wish I hadn't done this. I wish I hadn't chosen to embrace who I am and just be who I am out loud. For all the crap I've gotten, I've got no regrets in that regard, because every day I get to be myself. I get to be the person that I've been pretending to not be for the first 41 years of my life. That was a lot more work. That was a lot more stress. Just getting up and knowing every day, there are a lot of people that accuse my lifestyle of being a performance. And I can say right now, the performance was that first 41 years. Mm-hmm. There was a joke. There's this joke I've had in my head that, there's a lot of criticism saying, and people saying that this is not just a performance, but this is an insidious performance, because I'm doing all of this in order to worm my way into female spaces and spy on women. And I'm like, it's a lot closer to that for the first 41 years, because I've got a lot of fucking dirt on what guys talk about when they don't think there's anyone else paying attention. And it's messed up. Sorry, I'm dropping the occasional. What's the language barrier on this podcast?
We're okay.
Hang around long enough, I'll drop it too.
Yeah.
I'm trying so hard, because it's one of the running gags in the strip, is that it was literally the punchline of the first strip was that I'd come from doing an all ages comic with the talking dog to doing one about my life. And I'm like, oh no, wait, I'm going to curse my poop off, because it's my comic strip. It's about my life. And guess what I talk like?
Like an educated sailor. That's.
Oh yeah. Yar.
So what is the story behind this? Because we were talking about Godzilla before we went live. So
okay, this actually came out of a strip that we did that's in the first book, that it's one of Katie's favorites that she colored, of conversation that Heidi and I would have. Heidi is a full foot shorter than I am. Like, her head come up to here on me. In the comic strip, I really even that out. Like, we do the apple crates and trenching so that our heads are closer to this height difference, because I don't want to have to constantly figure out how to place word balloons when her head's down here. It's a huge pain, so we just fake it for the strip. She's a lot shorter than I am, and I've had people tell me that, they're like, oh, I never even clocked you, or, because they'd met me sitting down. And when you're sitting down, most people are roughly the same height, because a lot of our height differences in our legs, with a few exceptions, and, the torsos are roughly similar. So when I'm sitting down at a table, I don't look that much bigger than anyone else. But, that's like, I've got to, if I'm in a photograph with, most people, I'm doing this to get into the shot. So it would be a case where sometimes we'd be in a restaurant or something and we'd be sitting there and I'd be bemoaning one thing or another in regards to things like height. And Heidi's like, well, no one's staring at you. No one's looking at you or anything. I'm like, yeah, wait. And I'll stand up and you'll see like 6 or 7 heads. And so I visualize that as me as Godzilla, crushing the city. And it's one of the things I like about doing the strip is that even though it's very based in our everyday life, which is, remarkable mundanity, it's a cartoon, it's a comic strip. I can take that and visualize things in that way that, that visualized imagination that cartoon loves to do, be it, Winnie the Pooh, Calvin and Hobbes, Muppet Babies, pardon me, anything. The idea of you can take your imagination and visualize it. My touchstone was always those old Looney Tunes cartoons, the little Ralph Phillips cartoons. I always loved those. And so that's always been a huge inspiration to me, of the idea that, you can imagine something in the strip. And instead of me just talking about it, I can draw that. So here's me as Godzilla. I did a strip not too long ago where we went to a public pool and I was super self-conscious for a variety of reasons, not the least of which one is that I missed a quarter-size section of leg hair right on my heel. Like not the heel, but I'm an artist. I should know my anatomy better. Those 2 little bones in your shin that are hit on things and it hurts.
Oh, yeah.
I just hairs sticking out. I'm like, oh my God, it's like big black tentacles. I can't not see them. So I draw that as literal tentacles dragging children underwater because it's much more fun than just me being like, look at these hair. It's a fun way to visualize these things. So that's where the me as Godzilla came from.
Yeah. And
that's what Ally McBeal afforded me.
Yeah.
She'd be inside of her head and I'd be like, this is my imagination. Like, these are the things I overthink and see inside my head.
I loved that show until they did one episode that ruined the entire concept of her imagination for me. She was dancing in her room and her roommate came in and just saw her dancing like a crazy person, called her out on it, and Ally McBeal turned and hissed at her to get out. And I'm like, that's no longer visualized imagination. That's a psychosis. Now by showing her bestie noticing it and showing how angry she got when the illusion was shattered, I'm like, oh God, you just turned it into something real now. And this is an extension of that. I was working on a calendar that I never ended up finishing I'm like, okay, well, I did the Godzilla piece and I'm like, that gave me ideas for other me as monster girls things. So I was watching some cartoons and I was thinking about the Fantasia Night on Bald Mountain sequence. And so I had all the little things are my dog Poe as the little ghostly spirits. And that was just, once I had the idea for the Godzilla piece, I did a whole bunch of other ones.
Yeah. What about this one as Kool-Aid?
This is very much the bartender in question, I believe, Lori. So she's based on a real bartender in town that's a friend of ours. And sometimes we would use her in the early strips as kind of an excuse for some. Heidi can't be the one who's always asking me some of these questions because we've been together for going on 12 years now. So it doesn't make any sense for her to be the one to ask me certain basic questions, especially when she was with me when I came out the whole time. But a lot of people do have misconceptions of what it's like. And some people are like, in that case, it was, well, did you come out piecemeal? Did you like talk to this person and talk to that person and then maybe talk to that person? Did you do it over months? No. I debated myself for decades. I argued with myself. I tried to come up with every conceivable excuse of what else it could be because it can't be that. I convinced myself, I'm a frumpy potato shaped, pushing 300 pounds, 6'2". I cannot come out. I am never going to look, I'm going to always look like a joke. You convince yourself of every possible reason that you can't, and ergo, it can't be that. It must be something else. I went through that for decades. But when I finally did make the final decision to be like, I cannot continue putting this back into a box. The box will no longer hold it. The box has failed. There was no piecemeal. So for me, it very much was the equivalency of coming through a brick wall. You know, oh yeah, and that's it. I did it all at once in one fell swoop, and I visualized it as the Kool-Aid Man. So again, it's an opportunity to take that idea in the strip of describing that, yes, I kind of came out all at once in the course of a day to everyone in the world who knew me through either a bunch of phone calls and then a bunch of big social media posts and a comic strip. There was no subtlety involved in it, and there was nothing I could think of that was a less universally acceptable visualization of lack of subtlety than that image.
Yeah. So I hope I'm not the only one that's worried for Sarah as I see this brick wall behind her. Now she's gonna watch behind her make sure.
I'm pretty sure she's not in.
I wasn't worried. Now,
not in danger.
Oh yeah.
Didn't occur to me till just right now.
So
I wasn't even thinking about the brick wall. I was like, what? And then I was like, oh yeah. I'm a little slow.
Yeah. So when I showed you this before we went live, you said this is definitely a conversation piece. This one right here.
Yes. Very, very popular strip for a while, based on two conversations in general. Ever since coming out, I would bemoan the physical body upon which I've been living in. You know, there's a lot of folks, and I've used this analogy as well, as, you know, puberty is like getting, you know, poisoned by the wrong chemicals as you're developing when you're trans. You go through puberty and your body just starts doing whatever the hell it wants to do. And you're like, stop doing this, please. And you get stuck with it. And especially after about age 25, 26, your body's done cooking and there is nothing hormones are going to do to help in certain capacities. Coming out 41, you know, I'm on hormones and I'm going through the process. I'm seeing a therapist. I'm doing everything the way I'm supposed to do it. But certain things are always going to be what they were. You know, hormones will only do so much. Hormones will only, you know, I was having a little bit of breast growth, but I was, you know, I'm fairly large. I have a fairly large rib cage. So what I was getting did not really look like much of anything. And I was very bummed about that. And so I would bemoan that with Heidi. And if, you know, when conversations would come up where there were friends who would be asking me about certain things, and 99.9% of every cisgendered woman that it was a friend of mine, be it Heidi, be it anybody, be it about half the studio, would be, I'll trade you some of mine. You can have some of mine. I'm like, oh man, I wish my boobs were bigger. Oh, you can have some of mine. And then I would, you know, if it was a short person, oh, I would do anything to have, you know, your height. And I'm like, I'll trade you a few inches. And so the conversation in that strip, Heidi and I are there playing pool and we're talking about that. And I'm like, oh, if I could actually make that, you know, if I could actually take people up on that, this is what I'd look like in 7 minutes. I'd be, you know, I'd be this short with those boobs. And, you know, so I'm like, let me visualize that, because that's the whole idea of, and I think even that's part of the punchline where Heidi's like, you're visualizing it, aren't you? Like, yes, of course I am. We were having this conversation. That's how my brain operates. I'm like, oh God, if I could take a cup size from every woman who's offered me it and give up an inch to every person who wants to be taller, you know, 6 minutes in, that would have been me. And I'm just sitting there, I regret nothing.
You have this conversation with about yourself all the time, right?
Yeah. Only I talk about childbirth because all my friends that had babies, they were like, oh my gosh, they got so big. And then I was like, it's like cruel joke. Like, you know what got bigger? My ass and my stretch marks. Thank you very much. No boobs. Nah, none of that. Exactly the same size. My ass got bigger. My stretch marks got bigger. Nope.
So, Sarah,
The gray in my hair got long more.
do you remember when you read your first comic and what it was?
I kind of remember reading. I did not really have comics growing up, and I was at my cousin's house, and he was an only child, so there was just boy stuff there, and he did have a very small stack of Superman comics, and I remember being. I was there, and there was everybody else had to step out for a minute, and they're just like, just chill in here, you'll be fine. We're only gonna be gone for like 15 minutes, and of course, my little goldfish brain, I was instantly bored. So I started to dig through their stuff, and I found his Superman comics, and I could not tell you what issue it was, what storyline, nothing. I can't tell you any of that, but I do remember picking it up and going, wow, this art's really fun, but I have no idea what's going on, so I can't follow this story, so I don't want to. I want the very first issue so that I can know what's going on. I don't want this middle of the whole storyline issue. And it was a Superman, and somehow that did not like translate into a love of Superman as an adult. I don't care that much about Superman. And
What
then I
about-
really
Care
picked
about
it up.
comics, that's all
Right,
that matters.
I started picking up a new interest after Lori pulled me into UHS. They're one of the people had disappeared, and they couldn't get in touch. They didn't know where they went, and so she asked me, because I have been a graphic designer for ages at this point, and she's like, do you know how to letter? And I was like, you're gonna have to be more specific. And then she's like, well, like comics, like the word bubbles, can you do that? And I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, you'll have to teach me the specifics, but yeah, of course I can do that. And that's how I ended up in UHS. And funnily enough, think I've lettered like one very short section of one comic. Like I did almost no lettering, despite that being why I got pulled in. And so, developed an adult appreciation for comics, and definitely prefer the indie stuff to the mainstream stuff that I've read now. So, I guess I'm keeping up with the MCU, but I'm not really reading a lot of mainstream comics these days. Mostly indie stuff.
Yeah. What about you, Dee? Do you remember your first comic?
Not really. It's another problem where it's like I can't remember ever not reading them. Like, so, I know that like my first Superman comic was probably one of those ones that you got from Radio Shack, where it's like Superman versus the Calculator, and there's some rando kids that are trying to help him save the day that you don't care about. All that kind of stuff. Like I was definitely a Marvel kid growing up because I didn't have access to the DC comics. Most of my comic knowledge at the time came from reading my brother's collection, and he was Marvel. Spider-Man, Daredevil, X-Men, during the late 70s and early 80s runs. The first books I picked up on my own were probably the Marvel Star Wars comics. And that was where I actually started and I've told the story a few times, was the Marvel Star Wars comics. That was one of the first places that I really started understanding the concept of people making comics, because I'd pick up some of these books and they'd be like, oh, that's boring looking. That doesn't make me that excited like Star Wars made me excited as a kid. And then I picked up, I think, issue 51. I picked up purely on the cover. It's Luke, and he's on the ground, and he's shooting up at one of the chicken walkers. It was a really cool cover, and I picked up the book, and it blew my mind. I was like, oh, this art actually makes me think of the movie Star Wars. It's super exciting. It opens with some X-Wing pilot who's like passed out in the cockpit, and their ship is flying crazy, and the rebel freighter had to shoot out these grappling suction cups to the wings to try to grab it, and it rips the wings off, and it's just the cockpit flying around, and the shit's shooting out of the page, breaking the panel border, and it was Walter Simonson. And I started paying attention to that, and I saw, well, okay, he'd also done there was an X-Men issue that he did, and I'm like, Walter Simonson. And then the X-Men Teen Titans card, Walter Simonson. And I'm like, wait, when I see this name, I like these books better than the other books with the same characters. And then I started doing that with Spider-Man. At the time, it was Amazing Spider-Man was John Romita Jr., and I do not remember the artist on Spectacular. I just knew I liked Amazing better because that looked cooler. And I started realizing at that age, people make comics. And then, it's a leap to go, I'm a people. And it kind of went from there. But yeah, the earliest stuff I can remember buying of my own was probably Star Wars comics. Everything else for the longest time was just stuff I was reading from my brother's collection until he fell out of collecting, and then I just kind of picked up the slack. And just started collecting on my own. But yeah, as far as first comics, I could not tell you because I don't remember ever not reading them.
Yeah. And, I'm looking behind you. I can see you're a fan of so many different things. It looks like you have some anime back there. You have DuckTales. What else is behind you back there?
Oh, yeah. So we got DuckTales here. We got the Drew Struzan Hellboy poster that they didn't ever use for the movie. Let's see. This is, I think, that is it's a book called Princess Ugg by Ted Naif, which I absolutely love everything he does. He did Courtney Crumrin, Death Jr., a lot of creepy stuff. Very, very great stuff. Courtney Crumrin is an amazing comic. I cannot recommend it enough. I think Oni published it. That's an old Heroes Con program book that the cover was by both Romitas, and a friend of mine purchased it signed by both Romitas because I'm a huge fan. Then just, let's see, some Haunted Mansion stuff here. Star Trek ships because I'm a huge Star Trek fan. And then just rows upon rows of books. I got some Transformers over here. Some original art from friends that have done, like back when I was doing Dandy, I'd get like fan art. So there's a couple of pieces from Dana Simpson, who's since become massively successful with the comic strip Phoebe and Her Unicorn in newspapers. The books are New York Times bestsellers, incredible comic strip, really great. We've been friends for years online, and she did a bunch of pieces for me back in the day. And just, yeah, lots of comic strip stuff. Most of the books here are comic strip books and like digest books. So stuff like that. And then a lot of Marvel, DC, a lot of indie stuff. These days, like Sarah, I am mostly reading indie stuff. And very, very little of it is superhero type stuff. My favorite book over the last couple of years is one that Boom put out called Giant Days. I adore that book with all my heart, and it's about a group of girls at university in England. That's literally what the book's about, and there's not really any overarching plot. Just they're at university, they're diametrically opposed personalities that are really funny. Most of the Lisa Tremaine started on the book, the first few issues, but the majority of the remaining 50 some odd books was by a cartoonist named Max Sarin, who I worship at the altar of how good they are. Incredibly expressive, incredibly cartoony and fluid, and just blows my mind. I found this one not too long ago. I'm really loving, called What If We Were, which is just about two girls in high school who imagine themselves as different things, and the comic visualizes it. Obviously something I like. As a game that they play when they're bored. Oh, what if we were in a Tolkien fantasy realm and they imagine themselves as dwarves with big dwarf beards, and they're like, why do we have beards and everything? It's really fun. It's fun. It's got really cute cartooning. Yeah, a lot of the stuff that I do read these days is a lot of indie stuff. I've fallen out for the most part of most of like the Marvel and DC stuff that I grew up with. I think there's just a bit of a drift that happens when you're telling never-ending stories with the same characters that don't get to develop, change, or grow, because every time they do, they get retconned back. And as a reader, I just find I can't get as invested anymore because, well, that big change, like, I think, the spoilers, I know Superman's identity has been public knowledge for a while, and they just put that genie back in the bottle, and I'm like, well, there goes that character development. Got to maintain the status quo.
Yeah. So I take it you're a film fan as well, since you do have that Hellboy poster behind you.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely.
So what are your thoughts of James Gunn now being in charge of DC?
I've got mixed thoughts. I'm really bummed that we're not going to get another Henry Cavill Superman movie, because I will say that while the Joss Whedon cut of Justice League is an unbalanced mishmash of styles where he tried to incorporate his own, jokey punchline based action up against Zack Snyder's nihilism and darkness and grit and all that, and the two did not go well together at all. We got 5 minutes at the end of that movie of Cavill playing a very traditional Superman who smiled and rescued people and wore a costume with colors in it. And I was so down for those 5 minutes of Superman that we got at the end of the movie that I was desperately hoping we were going to get a full movie with that guy, because I always thought he was a very good Superman in movies whose scripts I vehemently disagreed with the direction of the character of Superman. Like, I don't think they're bad movies. I'm just like, but I don't know the guy he's playing in them. It's not the Superman. And I'm not, there's a lot of variations and ideas on it. It's a valid version of the character. But I love that when we finally did get a couple of minutes of him playing classic Superman, it was just wonderful to me. And I'm like, I wanted to see so much more of that. I know that he's got an idea that's kind of like, it's not a re-origin, but it's an earlier days, younger version. And I'm very bummed. I don't feel like we need to go back again and see Superman learning how to be Superman again in his career. We just need to hit the ground running with the new Superman movie. We don't need to see his origin. We don't need any of that crap. We know who Superman is.
Gunn is taking a lot of inspiration with a lot of the announcements that he made this last week from Grant Morrison.
Yep, which I'm very happy about.
Yeah, so like Batman Brave and Bold, Superman Legacy, and then I'm very curious on the Swamp Thing movie that's coming. James Mangold, who I think is one of the best directors out.
Oh yeah, he's never made a movie that I think was anything that was, I mean, I remember The Wolverine got a little bit of crap. I loved The Wolverine. I thought that was a great Wolverine movie, and Logan was chef's kiss. But I always consider that the equivalency of a Marvel Elseworlds. That wasn't, to me, that was not the actual same Wolverine that we have been seeing these characters play. It's a tangential Wolverine. They even addressed that in there with the presence of those comics where he's like, that's not how it was. Giving you the idea that, okay, this might be one step to the left of the Wolverine we've been watching, which I'm fine with. It was its own thing and it was so awesome. But I also loved his very more traditional take on it in The Wolverine, and I thought that was great. And I'm excited that he's the writer and director of the upcoming Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah.
He's done some amazing things.
Yeah. And I think when he decided to take the reins to do the new indie film, because he worked on the indie films with Spielberg and Lucas. I think he was like a first unit production director or something. So he shadowed them. So when Spielberg stepped down from directing the new indie, I was like, James is the right guy. So he's definitely the right guy, I think, for Swamp Thing.
Oh yeah. Well, he's also a stylistic chameleon too. Like, I mean, just again, looking at the difference between The Wolverine and Logan, you'd never know that was the same director. And then Ford versus Ferrari. I mean,
that was a good movie.
Yeah, he goes with, so this is gonna, Indiana Jones, that literally does, that new one, that looks like a Spielberg movie. When you look at what new Spielberg movies look like in terms of their visuals, like that West Side Story remake and Ready Player One, this looks like a Spielberg movie. So, yay. And I think, Swamp Thing is going to look like a Swamp Thing movie, and I'm excited for that. There's a few things that I'm really excited for that they announced. It's the weird stuff that I'm excited about. It's the police procedural take on Green Lantern that sounds interesting, but the Booster Gold is the series I'm most excited about because it's the most different from anything we've seen from DC so far.
Yeah. As soon as they announced Booster Gold, there was I know they're probably going to cast younger, but there is a person that is totally the role, and that's Sean William Scott. I think he would be perfect as Booster Gold.
I feel that data.
I can see that. I
May be
can
a
see
little
that.
too old.
Oh, I see.
Either Wilson brother could totally do it, but again, a little too too aged out by this point. However, since James Gunn even acknowledged Booster Gold is kind of the, it is imposter syndrome, the character. So that's the one case where I wouldn't mind them casting a slightly older actor, because then you have an older actor who has to also add that to their imposter syndrome of feeling like a fraud. They're also too old to do what they're doing. That could be an interesting. If anyone is going to be cast with an older actor, that's the one I think would make the most sense to the idea. But I see why. I understand from the narrative point of view why they want younger actors, because they want these actors to be able to play these characters for at least a good decade, which I get. On the same token, it's like when they cast Robert Downey Jr., he was not young as Iron Man, and boy, I kind of like the fact that most of the main Marvel hero characters those actors are in their 40s or early 50s, and it does not matter for the narrative. Their physicality doesn't. First off, I have this thing with movies where it's a pet peeve of mine. Like, I know Hugh Jackman's talking about how he's going back to the gym, and it's going to be 6 months of intense working out, and his family's going to hate him, and everyone who knows him is going to hate him. And I'm like, or you could just let the massive CGI budget fix it for the 2 shots you don't have to have your shirt on for. We also know that none of these people can fly or shoot webs or any of this stuff. Why? I don't understand why audiences get so bent out of shape over the idea that they also didn't torture themselves for 6 months. Like with Robert Pattinson playing Batman, he was in great shape, but he wasn't in cartoon ripped, I spent 6 months starving myself. And it's like, no, he just got into good functional shape to play Batman. I don't care. It's like, I don't get, it's almost like a weird value judgment so many fans have, like you didn't earn the character by working out enough. I'm like, you're actors. I get that you're not really Batman. I'm pretty sure you can't, I'm pretty sure Henry Cavill can't fly. Yeah, some of those shirtless shots look great. At the end of the day, some of these actors are also hurting themselves trying to get into shape like this.
Yeah. Well, I know,
I don't think it's
with Henry
necessary.
Cavill, though, even before he was Superman, he was in great shape. He was just
if it's your thing, like, I think that should be the whole thing. It's like, well, you can't come down on, okay, how long did we really see Robert Pattinson in the suit in the movie?
In the Batman suit?
Where it was light enough to actually see every contour and to see if he was really in shape or not. Like,
he's actually in the suit for the majority of the movie. It's the only time it's ever happened in a Batman film, and that suit was sculpted.
And so who cares at that point? Like, can he deliver the lines and be relatively convincing? Like, I'm sorry, but this is the same thing that people say about everybody who's ever been cast as something that was their childhood hero. It's like, okay, well,
yeah.
Well, Dee did say they're actors. I mean, they're supposed to be playing somebody they're not.
Those times, like when what you've mentioned about Hugh Jackman and I know Chris Evans, or one of the Chris's,
both of them, Chris Evans and
Hemsworth, and how, like, all of them, how they like starve themselves and they're at the gym all the time and they dehydrate themselves to make themselves for this peak physical model. It's like, that's not the peak physical model. They are literally dying slowly by doing that to themselves. So why are we continuing to promote that on screen as the peak physical model, and then like ruin an entire generation of little boys who think that that's what they need to look like? It's like,
and then
you really don't. Most women like a little bit of squish on a guy, and they're gonna cuddle you a lot better if you aren't rock solid and you know your skin isn't 900
the thing
degrees.
Is, if you've watched Limitless, you know that Chris Hemsworth really does enjoy working out, and he enjoys that part of the physique. And even if he doesn't look like Thor on Limitless, there's still very little difference. Like that's just
it's bulk
the definition
mostly.
and stuff. Yeah, like it's there. He's in much better shape when he's doing Limitless than he ever is in Thor. He is miserable when he's Thor. And if Hollywood stops showing it in movies, then people will stop thinking that Jason Momoa is fat because he doesn't have a visible six pack. It's like, no, man, that six pack's there. It's just under a little bit of skin and fat tissue, and that's not bad.
That's perfectly normal. Well, how much crap did that poor actor who played Namor get because he didn't have the ripped six pack? Shock of shocks. Namor didn't dehydrate himself to play Namor.
People fat shamed Maui in Moana, and it's like you're fat shaming a cartoon character, and also he's not fat. He's a mountain, and he's supposed to look like that's what. And
Kylo Ren in The Last Jedi had that one shirtless shot, and everyone made fun of him for that. And I'm like, first off, that guy was a Marine, so that's a body that's designed for functionality. And he was in fantastic shape. But again, we've equated the idea of in shape with I can see the striations of every muscle and vein. And that's not in shape. That's I'm dehydrated.
Yeah.
Please feed me.
Yeah, that's
water, preferably.
Adam Driver, that dude is huge. Like he's 6'5", I think. He's tall.
Yeah, and a former Marine, and that was the body that you have. It's like, well, it's like when you talk about like, they don't look. There's some video game where they had a version of Thor that basically looked like the guy that plays the Mountain. He had a big old gut, and it's like, yes, that's what really strong power lifters look like.
Yeah, what happened to the World's Strongest Man stuff? Like, I used to watch that on ESPN and stuff when I was a kid, and it's like, they never looked like Thor. They never looked like Superman. They looked like what everybody likes to fat shame on the internet these days. It's like, but do you want to do that to his face? I bet you don't.
Actually, there's like something that's very equivalent to that now. Dana White of the UFC bought this thing that he fell in love with on YouTube called slap fighting. And they air it now on.
It's called Power Slap.
Yeah, and none of these guys are like super muscular guys, but you could see like
the force.
Braun Strowman came from Power Man and Mark Henry and all that. So
from powerlifting and power.
Yeah, Mark Henry is don't mess with that guy.
He's a mountain. Like he's a mountain of a man. And so
is Braun Strowman. I'm not calling him huge as in fat. He is huge as in he is huge. And he will squish you with one finger if you mess with him. Like he is shit.
It'd be like
a comedian.
I mean not everybody
Hulk and
is
Loki.
Yeah.
Patton Oswalt had a whole bit about the guy, it was a short wide guy who picked the guy up and then smashed him back down, and that ruined that guy's life. And how it was hilarious, but it was also that's just another example of what Thor looks like, and what Superman and Batman, what they look like on screen, is not what a strong, healthy person looks like in real life. And
not everybody's gonna look like The Rock or John Cena.
And I feel like women get the same thing, because even women who are working out and who are like bodybuilders in a way, there's always something like wrong with them too. And it's like, okay, well, China was, how tall was she? Like 6'2", 6'3".
Yeah.
And she just didn't look like the average woman. So they found a way to womanize her more. Like, how is that fair? Like, we just assume that because you don't look traditional, you should have to work harder to be something else. And I'm like,
I mean, look at Danny Garcia, The Rock's ex-wife,
and she's like in what I would consider perfect condition for someone who is in her 40s and previously a bodybuilder. Like, I think she's in great shape. Now, some people are like, well, she's not skinny enough. She's not this, she's not that. And like, she's not supposed to be. Like, our bodies are not all ever going to be that. Like, I'm never going to be a size 3. No size 2.
No Barbie.
No Barbie. Like, I'm too short.
Oh my God. If you
My
look
boobs
like
aren't big
Barbie,
enough.
then you'd be dead. That's what, like, Barbie is not real.
Yes, you wouldn't be able to stand up because
You wouldn't be, and you wouldn't be able to even crawl on your hands and knees because the spinal column is so thin that you would snap if you tried that. Like, it's not real. It's not real.
Speaking of Barbie, though, can I just say I am kind of excited to see that movie because I think it's going to be super meta. I think
that trailer is brilliant. That was one of the most brilliant trailers I have seen in a very long time. The 2001 parody.
Barbie stuff in general is not really my thing, but I'm like, I was watching
I'm
bits of that.
intrigued.
And I'm like, I'm kind of down with that.
I mean, Ryan Gosling is in it, and Simu Liu, who was Shang-Chi, is going to be in it.
Yeah, and I think he's getting musical numbers, and which is great because he's got some skills and he can dance.
Right.
It's just funny that, you know, it took us to now to get to this point where we're like, we're going to just be really meta about everything. Like, I love it, I personally, but whatever. But like, because I wasn't a Barbie fan when I was a kid, because I was like, well, first of all, this bitch has everything, and I'm never going to look like her. Like, I need like.
You don't want, I mean, you wish you had the mansion and the pink Corvette. And...
Not a pink Corvette, but, you know, just everything. And
then
her
Jeep was really
a car
nice.
that actually belongs to me, maybe? Like,
I just needed it
her
to
car
be
was
like,
paid off. I'm just saying.
I just needed kind of like, you know,
well, what about
Bertha or something. I needed a girl to look like me that could also have everything. Like,
you did want Barbie's closet, though, right?
Well, yeah, but I wanted all the clothes to look good on me, too.
Yeah, we never had plus size dolls like when we were growing up, and we're starting to get them now within the past 15 years, maybe. Like, and they're not really plus size. They're just like they're doing the same thing with the dolls that they do with women's clothes. Like, if they want to make it plus size, they just take that pattern and they just make it bigger by 2 inches everywhere. And it's like, that's not how bodies work. You need to shape it in different places. It's
like trying to get a 90s
in the right place, but you're screwing this up.
It's like trying to get a 90s superhero artist to draw anyone who didn't have that physique. And it's like, okay, you know, you do this stuff great, but now you need to draw a frumpy character. And they can't. They just draw muscular balloon figures and overinflate them. And you're just like, that's not how bodies function. No.
They're trying to like reverse cheese all that them. Like, just put some glasses on it. That makes them ugly, right?
Oh, yeah. But I remember seeing that, and a lot of comic artists in the 90s would try to draw like a token overweight character for the background, or like 90% of the artists who tried pulling off Amanda Waller during that period. And it was just like, again, you were just drawing a skinny person and making everything bigger, like you used the liquefy tool on them. And it's just, no.
I think
you can't tell me that they've never seen a fat person out in real life either. It's like, yes,
they just don't comprehend what they're looking at, though, because they can only see things through that one filter, and it's just like.
And there's no excuse
but
today.
It's hard.
I feel like the only person, Terry Moore, when he drew Francine in Strangers in Paradise, was probably the only person that ever really took into account what it was like to be a bigger girl, like in that whole world. Like, he had proportions right, and he had like the attitude right, and she was still incredibly beautiful. Like,
and he drew her weight fluctuated with her mood quite perfectly. It was always in line with the characterization, and she'd go from looking frumpy because she felt frumpy to looking great because she felt great without ever once changing the way he drew the body. You know, that's a perfect example. Would be Terry Moore's work.
To see Strangers in Paradise be like a Amazon series, I think
it could easily be an animated Amazon series. I think I'd rather see it animated. I don't want to see it in live action because I don't think anybody could really take the essence of either character. Like, I just animate them. Yeah. Like, I just need that in my life. But I guess, like, for me, like when I was growing up and I was watching wrestling and I was watching all these girls just like these tiny little itty bitty things, and it was just about, you know, tits and ass. And I was like, okay, what about the rest of us who don't have that to fall back on?
Yeah.
Like, you know, we don't have just that. Like we have a lot more ass or a lot more thigh or a lot more whatever it was. And there wasn't anybody that looked like us. And everybody that looked like us was made to look ugly.
Yep.
That was like, I was
Yeah, we were the bad
horrified
guys.
by it.
Fat people and ugly people were the bad guys in I
Everything.
just was watching a thing. Captain Planet was great for othering fat
Yeah.
and ugly people. Like, and it's like, first of all, how dare you get to try and say what ugly is? That is in the mind of the beholder. Anybody, I can look at somebody and say, hey, I don't think that person's attractive, and then the person right next to me is like, what do you mean they're beautiful? Like, it's a thing you cannot do. Like, you cannot decide who's ugly and who's not ugly. And then, like, it's just demonizing fat people just drives me nuts as somebody who's fat because of just a myriad of different illnesses that I have to deal with. And it's like, do you think I chose any of this? And you're just reducing it down to nothing more than my appearance. So, like, grow up and mind your own business, and maybe stop being such a superficial
I guess
asshole.
I feel like that about a lot of things because a kid said something the other day. We read a story about a 12-year-old animal activist who decided to be a vegan. And I'm watching this kid and he's 12 years old and he's a little bit bigger of a kid, but his dad is like, you know, a mountain of a man too. Like he's tall and he's wide, like he's just going to have bigger shoulders and he's just going to be a bigger kid in general. And so the kid said something about, well, if he's vegan, why isn't he skinny? And I just went, you bite your tongue. Like, hold up. So I told him, I said, where do you think that comes from? And he said, well, I don't know. And I said, you just talked to me about how your metabolism was faster because you sat in my class and ate 36 cookies and not even blinked. Like he ate all 36 of these public cookies and nobody said shit to him because he's this big around.
Yeah.
Now, if I ate 36 cookies,
You ate one cookie.
I didn't eat any cookies and I gained 10 pounds watching him eat 36 cookies.
Yeah.
So I don't want to talk about that. But I told him,
But it's a value judgment for you. Then you become a bad person in their eyes and you're mockable. And yeah, that's bullshit. I hate that.
To say that about a child is stupid anyway, because I have a nephew who was remaining short and he started to get got to the point where my dad started making comments about how he's getting kind of chubby, and it's like, just calm down. He's 11 years old and now the kid
12-year-old
is 15
has not
and
hit
he is
5 foot yet.
Yeah,
Same
like
thing.
he's 15 and he is taller than me, I think. And I'm 5'4", so I know he's taller than me. And he is he just shot right up, and everything that everybody was being critical about is gone now. He's not fat. He is not short. Like, you were giving him, you were criticizing him for biology. You can't do that because he has no control over that. You shouldn't really criticize people over things that they have control over, but you definitely shouldn't criticize people over things they can't control.
I was so mad. I looked at him and I said, so do you think I just sit around and eat cookies all day? It's like, that's why I look the way I do. I said, it doesn't have anything to do with that. Like, if I had a choice, I wouldn't be this size. Like, this is not fun for me. I don't enjoy being the fattest person in my family. I don't enjoy clothes not to fit. I don't enjoy people looking at me going, oh, you know, like I'm always reduced to this, oh, she's the fat girl. And I'm like, granted, it made me a better human, probably. Like, I stand up for people.
Much more tolerant and empathetic if you have to grow up with negative stuff like this.
And I do think I'm funnier, I'm wittier. I think I have better vocabulary. I think in general, I think I'm a more well-rounded human, pun intended. But the point is that there aren't enough people, and I guess we'll bring it right back to this. It's like representation is key. Like, we're all dealing with battles. So if we're representing those battles, let's represent them in the best way possible. I am tired of, the fat girl being, don't just make her size 14, because the rest of us that's not plus size in any stretch of the imagination. That's normal human size. Like that's regular size.
I just had a thought about like the kid saying if he's vegan, why is he fat? Like totally opposite end of the spectrum here, but like that is majorly oversimplifying veganism too. Because you know what's vegan? Oreo cookies. You know what you can get fat from? Like there's just so many things wrong with criticizing a chubby kid for being vegan and saying he's lying, like suggesting, implying that he's lying because he's like there's so many things wrong with that.
Yeah, it's others. Yeah, so many value judgments, so many, it's one of those fresh. This is a scenario that pisses me off so much that I run out of words because my brain is going.
Yeah. So I was gonna say when we were talking about drawing, bigger characters, I was to say, God forbid if you need anybody to draw feet. Don't hire Rob Liefeld. That's an inside joke for a long time.
Aren't feet kind of hard to draw though? Like
feet are very hard to draw.
They're like hands. Like they're like the most.
It's very easy to make hands look weird. Like you can like suggest the shape of the hands and feet and make it look natural enough, but then if you actually try to put in the details, sometimes it turns into just a disaster.
In the world?
It's I've several times I feel like I'm okay at drawing hands now, but like I remember like taking pictures of my own hands in exactly the angle and then just like tracing over them because I got so sick of trying to get it right. And I was like, I can't spend the rest of my life trying to make this one thing look right. Screw it. I'm going to cheat a little bit and trace my own hand. Sometimes
I did that for a while. I did that for a while to try to get the idea for hands better. A part of the problem is that I got so used to doing very cartoony hands, and cartoony hands are a lot easier. And then all of a sudden you've got to actually make sure you've drawn something that has knuckles and the right number of knuckles, and which is a big problem for me. I only ever draw the first knuckle, and then I have to be they bend in two places. Feet are a pain. I just had to do feet for a pinup piece for the Giant Girl website, and oh my God, they're so hard to get right. Or worse, you end up drawing them and they look like Tarzan's feet from the animated movie where you're like, okay, but they shouldn't all look like they're able to pick up a skull and crush them.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, Dee. If you could go back to any place in time and there's a project that someone else did, whether it was a Marvel comic, a DC comic, an indie comic, or whatever, that you could be a part of, what would that project be?
Oh, this is actually a tough one because there is if it's a project that I really, really loved, then I wouldn't want to come in and mess it up. I'd want that thing to be that thing. So my brain would automatically go to something where I feel like something could have been better, but had a lot of good potential to be really good. That's a really tough one. I mean, there are a couple of She-Hulk arcs where I wish the art would have been better on it, but I don't know that I could actually do it. I mean, there's a lot of projects that happened that I would have loved to get a shot at during certain periods of my life. These days, I don't know that I would want to because it's such a crucible of fan expectations that no matter how good you do, there's always going to be a percentage of the audience that's going to wish your death for it. God, that's a tough one. That is a really tough. What project could I go back in time and be a part of?
I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Yeah, that is a tough question. It is a great question too, but I mean, it's a great question. It's a great question. I just don't want to answer it flippantly and
blow it off. I want to give it the proper an answer that I really think through.
I wish I could go back to Spider-Man 3 and tell the people who were in charge of making that movie, pick one fucking storyline and go with that. And if you want all 3 storylines to happen, then you need to make more movies than just 3, because that is too much story for one movie.
Yeah, that's a case where I really wish the producers hadn't have forced Venom onto Sam Raimi, because he desperately did not like the character or want to work on it, and it showed.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a result, the plots he wanted to tell with Sandman, and I think the only villain in that movie should have been probably Harry. It should have been the movie about reconcile that arc.
Agreed, 1,000%.
Well, he
Like, they
wanted
could have removed
Vulture
Venom.
actually to be part of it, played by John Malkovich.
He cast Malkovich. That was going to be the villain for the 4th film.
Yeah.
They built a suit and everything, and that would have been awesome. But yeah, the 3rd film was way too many chefs in the kitchen. They forced Venom on Sam Raimi, and he did his best with the material, but you could tell he was phoning it in when it came to Venom, especially the origin.
Venom, and it was still way too much story. Like, yeah, like you said, I agree that the villain should have been Harry.
Actually, you know what? Spider-Man 3 is a great example, because I have imagined what could have been done to make that. First off, I think if you remove Sandman, if you want to use Venom, borrow from what they did in the Ultimate Universe, and don't have Venom be an alien, have Venom be an invention. The suit was an invention design. It was in the Ultimate, it was originally designed to like take over the bodily functions so the human body could heal. And it was like basically absorbing and eating people. Have it be that. Have it be something Harry created as a way to kill Peter. And it gets out of his control, and he has now a legit reason for having his face turn at the end, because he's the one that created this monster.
Oh, like a reverse nanotech.
Yeah, have it, because that's what they did in the Ultimate Comics. It was like a biological nanotech thing but it was basically eating its hosts, just like the symbiote actually does. Have that be the case. Get rid of Sandman and make Venom that. Instead of just being a random piece of space rock that happens to land next to Peter's moped. Huzzah! No, that's crap.
Very shoehorned in, and it was just like you said, he phoned it in on that part.
Yeah, and we already know Harry is funding all kinds of weird stuff, like he funded Otto's work in the 2nd film. By this point, he's lost his mind. He's been empowered by that formula, so he's off the rails even more. All the Harry stuff I thought was great in that movie.
Yeah, like the movie,
have that be the
all
focus.
Those separate pieces of the movie were very. I thought like the Sandman and Harry and Venom, like they're all on their own. They were good. They were good individually, and then when you smash them all together in one movie that's supposed to be something that we're willing to go sit in an uncomfortable movie seat for 3 hours for, like, no. Yeah,
there were 2 good movies in there, and they smushed them together and made one movie. I mean, I even think about the god awful Batman and Robin, did the same thing. When I'm like, as much as I don't like a lot of the decisions made on that film, I do think about, well, what would have made it make more sense? Especially because at no point do I believe Batman's speech would have made Mr. Freeze turn to a good guy at the end. Fine. Make the disease that made Nora sick something that Poison Ivy created to wipe out humanity.
Oh, there you go.
And she keeps that from him while using him to forward her own goals. Reveal that, now he's going to turn good to help stop her and give up his information that helps cure Alfred.
Were those two
there
movies?
you go.
One step.
Now that movie totally would make sense. Now we know how bad that movie originally was, and it pretty much killed the comic book movie industry for a while. So if that version came out, I wonder how comic book movies going forward would have been. I mean, would have we gotten everything that we have?
The movie, all that would have done would be solve a plot convenience in a way that to me would make more sense. That wouldn't have changed the style, the direction, anything. That just means I would have been less like, well, that's just overly convenient. It's a pedantic point, but it drives me nuts.
Yeah, that whole movie, like, but I don't know. I sit here going, that movie had so much wrong with it, but also I love it because I know it's horrible and I don't care. I still love it, but I have that issue with a lot of really shitty movies. Like, I enjoy me a good bad movie.
Oh yeah, so do I, and I can appreciate the heck. Like I think the '66 Batman is a great bad movie, and in a weird way, people hate to admit it, but yeah, the old Adam West Batman was the most comic accurate version of Batman that's ever been on screen because that's exactly what those comics were like in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
you know,
I was gonna say here's a fun double feature, and I mean whether you think they're bad or not. If you watch 2017's Life with Jake Gyllenhaal, I think Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah. And then watch Venom. Life is a perfect prequel.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Actually, Venom to me is a good bad movie. I find both of those films quite fun, and they're not good in the way I would. They're well made. They carry themselves completely on how goddamn charming Tom Hardy is in that part. Literally chewing the scenery. And by the way, 2 movies and you have never once seen him out of his shirt. He's in sweat-soaked sweatshirts looking like he's about to die for 2 movies.
That's an excellent.
And both movies made shit tons of money.
Right.
And never once did we get him having, it's his thirst trap shot where he's in the shower.
Yeah. Well, I think
true.
also he has like tons of tattoos, so I don't think they wanted the character maybe to not have tattoos. I mean, they could have removed them with movie magic and stuff, but
oh yeah, they've got makeup for that. It's an interview. I've seen this in Daniel Radcliffe he really would love to have tattoos, but he's like, but I have too many friends that are makeup artists, and I can't do that to them because all they do is bitch to me about how hard it is covering up tattoos for movies. And he's like, I really would love one, but I can't do that to these people. They're my friends.
But that first Venom movie was good. I mean, it wasn't like Shakespeare, but it was decent.
I enjoyed the Venom movie, so I'm not going to say anything about it. And I enjoyed Batman and Robin. So, okay, fine. Like, so shoot me. I know there were like 500 stories going on at the same time, and dear God. But like there was something endearing about Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy, and there was something really true, like in the essence of Dick Grayson, like that Chris O'Donnell brought to that character.
I liked Chris O'Donnell's Dick Grayson. Particularly, I wish they would have kept the costume from Batman Forever because I love the classic, the Neil Adams redesigned Tim Drake costume.
I didn't like what they did to Batgirl. She's not related to Alfred. She's Commissioner Gordon's daughter, and that's the way it should have been.
Problem is you had the same problem there where it's like you needed an excuse to get her into the house for the narrative, and that was the only reason. That one didn't bother me that much.
Story writing, yeah.
Yeah, that one didn't bother me that much. She didn't really need to be in the house that desperately. Again, it's a movie where I feel like from a script point of view, a lot of movies do we're just going to change this. It's convenient, it's easier, and no one will care. It's the internet. Everyone will care now. If you change the slightest details, there are people that are still going to be up in arms because Hugh Jackman is 6'2" and Wolverine is 5'3", and they're still complaining, and it's like, I can't care anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been seeing all these comments from people talking about the James Gunn announcements and going, it better be based directly on this comic, and they better do this exactly like that. And I'm like, okay, Marvel has released what? Between Marvel and DC, we have had over 60 movie adaptations of superhero material since 2000. Not one of them. Okay, 2 of them. 300 and Sin City have been remarkably close to the source material with very little flourish. Everything from Marvel and DC is a complete and total, they're making this up based on bits and pieces of whatever they are not going to do. How many times does fandom need to get bent out of shape over the idea that this movie should be based exactly on the book? It's not happened before, and it's never going to happen. I remember I had friends back in the early 2000s that were like, the first Spider-Man movie should have been Gwen Stacy, and then she should have died, and the last scene should have been Mary Jane saying, "Face it, Tiger, you hit the jackpot." I'm like, that's not how movie storytelling works. You're trying to encapsulate at that point in time 40 years of ongoing monthly narrative into one 2-hour movie that is not guaranteed a sequel. You cannot do direct adaptations. And if you're going to do that, then at least learn your source material. Betty Brant would have been first.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a pet peeve of mine. If you want to be anal about continuity, at least be correct about it.
Right. See, my stance as a film fan is when they take novels, comic books, something based on an existing IP, I don't want it to be word for word verbatim. I want it to be, the source material, take the elements of what makes that IP what it is, and then sure, sprinkle in maybe some new things, just as long as you have the bullet points of what the story is. You have your beginning, your middle, and your end.
Yep.
There's people that say, no, it has to be exactly like the book.
I have the book.
But why? Why does it have... Nobody ever has answered that question for me. It's like, why does it have to be the same? Why does it have to be? First of all, like you said, Dee, it's not possible, but also, why?
Well, and it doesn't have to be the same. It has to be
good.
Similar enough that it's recognizable. Like,
yeah, if you're going to call it an adaptation, then it needs to be recognizable. Exactly.
It's like when we had Tom Hutchinson on, and he was talking about adapting his Oz books. And so you see these very like recognizable IP characters, and you still see each of them in their entity form in the book, but there's everything around it is different, and that's how it's an update. Words. Anyways, so adaptation. So the continuity and the clarity of the story is still there. It's just the little things around it are changed to make the setting different, or that's how an adaptation works. Yeah. My problem with adaptations of novels is that they miss entire things, or they give up, for time's sake, character development that mattered. And it's not always character development that you needed, like in storytelling. Sometimes it's character development in dialogue. Sometimes it's character development in setting. Sometimes it's character. All those things are meeting together to make that story. So for me, like, while Twilight wasn't the best book in the world, the adaptation missed a lot of marks. And for that matter, so did New Moon and every other one after it.
I think you might be my new friend. I have so much to say about Twilight books versus movies. So much.
But, like, and I'm saying too, because I was I'm a giant vampire fan, but like, and werewolves, but like they had L.J. Smith books, and her whole entire series of books called The Secret Circle was turned into a TV show that was ridiculous. Like, it was like, I don't even think somebody read the material. Like, you have to at least understand the source material in order to adapt it for whatever.
Like Vampire Diaries, you said they got...
Vampire Diaries was okay. It got a little weird after the third season.
I will say an example of an adaptation where they've changed almost every detail, and yet somehow, to me, it still works actually better than if they'd done it directly, is that most recent version of AMC's Interview with the Vampire. They changed the time. They made Louis black. They changed his backstory. And yet somehow they hit all the key important character development notes. And the producer said, because the reason is, why are we making these changes? And he goes, because, and he holds up the book, we're not just adapting this. We're adapting this, and holds up the entire series. This book was written before any of these, but these all inform what this could have been. And so they acknowledged in a very clever way that the story that we read from the novel Interview with the Vampire was still conveyed back in the 70s when that book was written. Now it's modern. Louis is telling his story again and remembering things in different ways because of the passage of time and his own thoughts. It's very true to the essence of the characters and what made them work in a way that actually I like better than the novel in a certain sense. And I adore that novel. But I kind of like that for the first time, Louis' angst doesn't make me want to slap him upside the head too. It works for me.
That comes from the character too, the way the character is portrayed.
Yeah.
Like for me, I don't think that Robert Pattinson was a bad actor, because I'd seen him in plenty of other things that I thought were good. Like,
yeah.
And then even Kristen Stewart, as much as I'd hate to say this, and I never really want to go on record saying this because I don't really like her, but that I've seen her in other things and she was really good. So seeing her in that is like, everybody starts somewhere and you hone your craft and you become better at whatever. And you're only as good as what you got. You know, like what can you do?
And I've said this multiple times. I'll die on this hill. I think one of the best book to film ever made, and it's number one, is The Outsiders.
It really was. And that's how the
book, I can't comment on that because I don't know the book. So
the
it's
book
been a while since I've seen
video.
or read, but yeah, it does a really and it's pretty faithful too, if I remember right.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's why that's
recently,
why they play both. That's why you read the book and you get to watch the movie in school, because the very small details that are changed are for storytelling reasons, like not just because you can't put it in the movie, as opposed to you know.
I know there was some people that complained about some of the things that the Hunger Games changed. I don't remember hearing anybody complain about Maze Runner. I think those were pretty faithful to the books. I did hear a lot of people complain about Ready Player One.
But you have to consider some of the things that are time dependent. Like, if you're going to write a book from the 70s and it happened in the 70s and it takes place in the 70s, and you're trying to make it look like it's taking place in another time, there's going to be some changes you're just going to have to deal with. Like, you're going to have to harness them. So the issue of like X-Men, for example. So, well, they're not blue and gold, you know, like they can't run around in spandex. Like that's not, it's not attractive.
I do like that joke in that first movie,
it's not attractive, but it's also not feasible. You like, I mean, there's just like reasons for it to be the way.
You have to do certain allotments, especially when it comes to comic book superheroes, for the real world. And I laughed at that joke too, though. What do you expect? Mm-hmm. Yellow spandex? I laughed at that too, but I kind of wish they never made that joke, because so much of the MCU is built on every movie they've done has at least one character make fun of the character's name or costume. And it's driving me nuts that it's such a running punchline. And it's just like, stop being so embarrassed of your source material.
I do think Kevin Feige, because I trust in his work, he hasn't let me down yet. I think he's going to be more faithful to the X-Men comics, character-wise. He's a fan. Like, I don't know if he's going to do more like lean into the 90s cartoon or like maybe the 80s, but I think we're going to see something very similar to the costumes.
I mean, they've been getting so much closer with the costumes, like especially in Phase 4, because it's like they've already taken over the world. They don't got nothing to lose, you know. So we're getting costumes that are getting closer and closer and closer to the source material. They just look like a thing that could exist now. You know, Ms. Marvel's suit was virtually identical to what she wears in the comics. It's just more detailed, a little more textures. You know, what She-Hulk's outfit is basically... The biggest difference is that she's got cap sleeves and little running shorts instead of it just being a bikini. or a one-piece bathing suit. You know, Moon Knight is Moon Knight.
About She-Hulk for a minute. That was something that there was a lot of hate. That was probably the most faithful to the comic that I've seen anything.
Oh, by far. And I absolutely love She-Hulk.
Well, and I can honestly say, like,
can I see that again?
That rendition right there. That's pretty freaking amazing, right there.
Yeah, this is probably the closest sculpt to an act. I think they probably just used the CGI model to do a 3D print and even printed the face on it because, yeah, this is stunningly good.
But I was a little annoyed. Like, I understand that there are a lot of weird people out there that look at like every little thing about CGI, and I'm like, you just take it for what it is. Like, I am a big picture TV watcher, so I'm taking in the entire setting design, like that entire design, not just one little thing about the CGI and the thing, whatever. So everything that I loved about She-Hulk was because I loved it about being a woman. Like, you're talking about harnessing this world that is dominated by people that don't get you. And I guess, like, for her, it was like, of course I can handle it better. This is what I do every day. Because if I did freak out and lose my mind and Hulk out, then you would just call me a bitch. Like, that resonated for me, like, in so many ways, because I'm like, oh, yeah. So I'm good under pressure because I'm already dealing with it all the time. I can handle this because I do it all the time. Like,
and boy, did that line piss people off. I mean, it was a perfect line that made absolutely perfect sense, especially for that character. Especially because there's and you had people who are, well, actually in the comics, Bruce, this isn't the comics. In the movie, Bruce Banner is clearly not suffering from dissociative identity disorder. While the Hulk may be a separate personality, that is not a psychological condition he brought into it. There's no indication of that whatsoever in live action Mark Ruffalo or even Ed Norton.
Yeah.
There's nothing that indicated that was a dissociative identity, multiple personality. Yes, that's the comic. The movie is different.
But even with the comic, you really could make a case for it not being that either. Because if you think about, like, Jekyll and Hyde, which is kind of what it's based on, it was kind of dissociative identity disorder, but at the same time, it's always about the wolf you feed. So if you are dealing with something and you can't control it, like, he goes through this whole time period where he's away trying to figure out how to control it because that monster's kind of been unleashed, but it's unleashed for all these other emotional reasons.
Yep.
And
it's
that's
giving
very
him
much
something.
what Jekyll and Hyde was.
Yep. Oh yeah, that's the thing. Jekyll and Hyde, like, especially in the book, it's not dissociative identity. It's his inhibitions have been released and now he feels free. He only ever refers to them as a separate individual, but just before he dies, because it's become too hard. Oh, I have consequences now. The Eric Bana movie, the Ang Lee directed one, actually does address it, and I loved that one. There's a scene where he's eating chicken, and it's gross because he's like, but he even acknowledges that on some level, he's enjoying it. He's enjoying the freedom. He's enjoying the rush that he gets from not having to be Bruce, getting that sense. And the Ruffalo version has never acknowledged that really, but it's clearly there. And, you know, and I think that's what they're leading to with She-Hulk as well, because they're leading us to her eventually being very much like the version in the comics who actually prefers being She-Hulk over Jen, you know, until she kind of discovers that that's not necessarily healthy either. Which was all part of the Dan Slott run, which is just amazing. But yeah, destructive pattern behavior. It's not something that you're just losing control. You're behaving in a way that is satisfying you on some level. You're getting an emotional release, even if it's nothing more than the endorphin release of having validation that I can't control myself. And then when you don't control yourself, you just gave yourself validation. You were right, and you get an endorphin rush. So every time Bruce would lose control, he's validating every time he says, I can't control it. And so it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle. You know, there's a meme that I saw going around. It's like, for every man that says they can't control their temper, isn't it amazing that they do so at work with their boss?
Yeah.
You know,
and
that they can amazingly control their temper pulled over by a cop.
There was a whole episode of something. What was that episode? Where he had like you couldn't tell whether he was killing his boss or not. Was that a 911 episode? It was super meta. And all of a sudden his boss does end up croaking and he's like, I don't think I did it.
Yeah, it was one of the latest 911 episodes.
So, I mean, I get it, but yeah, you can control yourself most of the time. But what I think with the Hulk and what She-Hulk is saying is, what about that 10% of the time when you totally lose your inhibitions and you let it run wild? And do you regret it at the end? Like,
yeah.
I mean, and I think in a way, it's a lot like what anxiety is. It's like, I can see myself spiral out of it. Like it's like I'm standing outside of myself looking at it going, this is the most ridiculous, like absolutely asinine thing that I'm doing right now. And I can't stop myself from doing it. Like I have gotten all up in there and just went kind of crazy for a second. And though I can't blame it on anything other than anxiety, it's like, this is who I am. It's like when you yell at a kid for making a fat joke and you're like, what do you think I do? Sit on my ass all day and eat 36 cookies? Like, I don't. But like, I didn't have a way of harnessing a better like delivery at that moment because I was angry and anxious and upset.
Whereas Jen's entire point that she makes in that scene is like, she's already a professional lawyer in a massively male-dominated field. Mm-hmm. She is so accustomed to keeping that under control that outside of her initial Hulk out, where she was did not know what was happening, ergo did not have the mental ability to contain that physical changeover and all the chemical rush that comes with it, and the one instance at the award show where she's simply mentally pushed too far, more often than not, it's the same mentality she has to do to control herself when dealing with that one asshole at the office. And every asshole who's ever, had to, all that nonsense, all the mansplaining bullshit and all the stuff. So yeah, it makes perfect fucking sense.
Overall, as women, I think we do have to harness more of that inhibition, that more of that exhibitionist things, because we don't want to be considered that. Mm-hmm. Like there's this whole whatever, it's okay for a man to be animalistic, but it's not okay for a woman to be. And so we've harnessed this ability to covertly be animalistic and bring ourselves back in much better than men can. And I don't think men liked that. Like they didn't want me on blast. And you know what? I'm sorry, but if I freak out and I call you every curse word, I'm uncouth. But if you do it, you're just being a man.
Yeah, if a man does it, you're assertive. If a woman does it, she's a bitch. She's out of control. She's hormonal. The word hysterical's frickin' root is telling.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what that show was literally all about. And I kind of love that I had a friend of mine who was very angry at that show because of the way they stoked the fire. They created all of this controversy. Bullshit. The second the show was announced, these people were coming out of the woodwork saying, oh, they're going to make the Hulk a girl now. That's people who had no idea that this was a 40-year-old character from the comics. Were tearing it to shreds on the announcement of a title that this would be a thing that would exist. The show was written
Brie Larson
around it. Oh yeah. She gets a you know, I love all of the intellectual arguments about why her character is terrible, and I'm like, oh, so everything that you loved about Tony, she's arrogant and snarky. That's literally every Marvel character. For some reason, you didn't like it with She-Hulk and Captain Marvel. Golly, what do they have in common? I have no idea.
Did you notice how many times that the promo photo shots and the posters and things for Captain Marvel got photoshopped so that she's smiling, because she'd be prettier if she'd smile more.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're not allowed to not be beautiful when no matter what we're doing, we have to be beautiful. It's
like look at the movie posters for the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. The Pirates of the Caribbean movies where they photoshopped boobs onto Keira Knightley.
Yeah. Yep. It's just like this understanding of what you consider this, like this split. Like, okay, well, the ogre girl, she's the one that's angry and she's now the villain, and so the anti-hero has to be. It's just it's so wrong, like on so many levels. And I love Brie Larson and I love Captain Marvel. Like, she's my go-to, but I'm just annoyed by you rake these women through the coals, and then you wonder why we continue to fight for what we believe in, because it's like you've made us this way. You continue to make us this way.
And it's so hypocritical. It's all so hypocritical, because if it's like the Rock test. Did you ever read or hear about the Rock test? Very informal. Like, if you see something that you criticize in a woman, if you say something to a woman, if you do something by a woman, and you would not do the same thing to the Rock, then it's sexist. That's like such a good test. Like, if this thing that you're doing to this woman and you're criticizing her for protesting about you doing to her, like, if you would not do that to the Rock, then what you're doing is indeed sexist. It's so far I haven't found a situation in which it does not work. It's a really good test.
Well, we'll definitely have to bring you guys back on so we can discuss some more of this, because I have kept you for a little bit, but this has been fun.
Okay, so I want to ask a question, because this was a question that we had that came up just in our pod recently. So, as a middle school teacher, we have a great amount of kids who are dealing with varying levels of orientation questions and just trying to figure out where they are.
Yeah.
So, I guess, what advice would you give to them going through that? Like you had mentioned you wouldn't wait until you were 40. You wished you had, went out and been who you were. When did you know who you were? Like, when did you know that what you were living in wasn't really you?
Literally, the same answer to my question about comics and drawing. I don't remember ever not knowing it. I was aware. I didn't have the language for it, because it's like I'm a little kid in the 70s. I don't have the language for how to explain to that I don't feel like a boy, because how do you describe what it feels like to be a boy or a girl? And yet, if you ask a cisgendered person who has no such questions, they know their identity. They just know it. And it doesn't have anything to do with their anatomy. At the end of the day, the answer is not because of what I have between my legs. You just have an inherent knowledge, that image in your brain of what's supposed to be and what's right and what's not right. And at a very, very young age, I knew that, and I didn't have the words to describe it. And when I tried to express it, I got made fun of for it, and I got tired of, like, I'd go to my mother and get, my brother and my stepfather would, laugh at me and make cracks at my expense. And, I'm in, first grade or kindergarten. And before that, get in trouble for, wanting the Wonder Woman underoos instead of the Superman ones and stuff like that. And it's very hard to describe the words because I don't have the language for it now, pushing 50, to say how to describe it in words other than people know their bodies and their minds a lot better than not. You have an inherent knowledge of that's part of your identity. And when it doesn't fit, everything feels wrong. And when it does fit, things feel less wrong. Things feel right. It's when it comes to talking to that about kids with the current political culture and climate going on, it's not something I would ever do. I would never volunteer for something like that because then I become a groomer. And I get called out for grooming, whereas, meanwhile you have parents going to their kids and saying, "Oh, what a lady killer," with their little boys. And I'm like, pushing kids, "Oh, you're going to be in love. You're going to marry her one day." And you're talking to a toddler about another toddler. That's grooming. That's putting that in them. And you know what? When I was a toddler, it felt really weird and really uncomfortable too. Same with there's a common argument, and I've gotten this at conventions about why does this story have to include sexuality at all? It's a superhero story. I don't care what their sexuality is. Their sexuality has nothing to do with the story. Okay, cool. Name me one superhero mainstream comic where their sexuality is not impactful on the story. Let's start with our Marvel movies. X-Men, love triangle between Cyclops, Wolverine, and Jean Grey, heterosexuality. Spider-Man, Mary Jane, the core plot motivator for all three films is she's in danger. Pick one. Steve and Peggy. Bruce Wayne and Selena. Bruce Banner and Betty. Tony and Pepper. Hawkeye's wife and kids. Every single one of these characters, and most of these solo, Clark Kent and Lois, the solo films all revolve around that. I remember I said, and I had to say this at a convention I was at, where when the live action Beauty and the Beast was coming out, and they make a fleeting reference to LeFou, a character we all know was in love with Gaston for 40 years now, of him being gay. Well, that's just shoving it down our throats. That movie has nothing to do with sexuality. That movie is literally all about heterosexuality. It's a love story. That's its core premise, revolves around true love. But the argument they make is a false one. It's the idea that when you bring homosexuality into it or bisexuality into it, that all of a sudden it becomes about ass sex. And no, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with characters that are simply in love and having emotional feelings for one another in that regard. And it's only ever thought of as something out of the ordinary when it's the thing that you don't like. But you had no problem with, what does this sexuality have to do with it? Well, why did Transformers the movie have a love triangle? But no one ever cared about the fact that clearly Springer was hitting on RC and so was Hot Rod.
Yeah.
They're giant robots. That wasn't shoving anything down our throat.
I want to say even the G.I. Joe cartoon had
Lady J and Flint was a regular thing. The Destro and Baroness.
Do you ever wonder though that if it's because there are so few female characters that they just become this I don't know if I want to say plaything, but in a way, I mean they're thrown into it because they don't know what else to do with them.
They're an object to be won. That's I saw somebody do a very in-depth pointing out of all of that in Star Wars, because Leia's the like name me one main character, like one big important character in that movie besides Leia that's a woman. Like there aren't any. I mean,
No.
in the original 3 movies, like they made an attempt.
There's literally only 2 other female characters that have names on camera.
Yeah.
Short of the slave girls in Jabba's palace, you have Aunt Beru and Mon Mothma. That is it in the original trilogy.
And they aren't even like, they don't even have that big. They don't have they're not that important to the story. They're not.
Yeah,
and
they're props.
Yeah,
and even like Leia is there to be a before we find out that she's actually Luke's sister, like Han and Luke are fighting over her, and she doesn't like either one of them.
Distress.
Yeah, she doesn't even like they don't even care. Like she points out it's quite obvious that she doesn't really care for Han right away, but like she doesn't really care about Luke either. She doesn't really particularly like either one of them, and yet they have that, and her feelings are completely disregarded in favor of who's gonna get the girl. It's like, so it's so dumb. It's like women should not be in a movie specifically to be the plot driver for the male characters. That's so. And then everybody is mad about it now. Like, well, everybody is mad about it now because now women are they're not having that. They're having their own stories, and they're not being driven by what the man wants in them. And it's a problem. And that's
I guess
going.
I didn't mean for it to like turn into a thing, but like because we ask the questions, like I feel like with anything that we're unsure about or we've never lived through, like asking questions and kind of trying to at least, I don't know, sympathize, empathize, understand a perspective of something. Like if you don't find someone you can ask a question to, then you've never been, informed about something. So in terms of always having been a cis woman, I don't know what that feels like. I know it on the side of orientation, but I don't know it on the side of gender. And so a lot of people blur those lines between orientation and gender. Like they don't, and
they have nothing to do with one another in that regard. And a lot of times, what you were talking about before with representation is a big, big deal. Nowadays, you got all these fans that are losing their minds over this idea. But you see these pictures of little girls dressed as Captain Marvel that are just fawning over Brie Larson. It matters. All of these things matter. All of these representations matter.
Two big movies
Encanto.
I was gonna say, well, like Black Panther for and then Crazy Rich Asians, 2 movies that represented Black culture and then Asian culture. So
I just sometimes think that when we talk about culture, like I think in a Christian culture that we live in, we don't embrace the otherness, like Native American Two-Spirits, Indian in Hindi. I'm not sure what it's called, but
it's in every culture. Since recorded human history, we have existed.
Christianity.
And it's not like we don't exist there. We're just not allowed to talk about it if it's Christianity.
And the whole, I mean, specifically with gayness, the whole concept of that being an abomination is based on a very flawed and very biased translation of the Bible that does not, like the actual Bible does not say any of that. And it's so frustrating.
It's a mistranslation and they stick with it. And what's worse is that even if it's an accurate translation, this also comes from the same book in the Bible that says you should be stoned to death for wearing a polycotton blend. So can we maybe not base our moral and legal codes around a Bronze Age novel with a shitty plot?
And there's so many other problems. There's so many other problems with the Bible, but like specifically with the the Bible says homosexuality is wrong. No, it doesn't. And if people would stop thinking of that as homosexuality is wrong, then I think it would go a long way to getting people to stop thinking of being trans as being wrong. Like,
yeah,
I mean, obviously there's enough difference that's not going to totally fix everything. But if you stop thinking that your Bible, your precious Bible, says something that it really does not say, then maybe you can start questioning your unwavering belief in some other things that are flawed. Like, why is it wrong if you are in a body that looks to other people as male, but you really feel like a female, or vice versa? Like, maybe your beliefs on that being wrong isn't accurate either.
Yep. And trust me, your knowledge of the science on it is not right either, because the science is insanely complicated.
Oh yeah.
Hi, fish. That scene in the kindergarten cop, boys have a penis and girls have a vagina. That was not a science course. There are something like close to 30 different chromosomal makeups that most people have. It's insane. It's like, no, you don't actually know what this information is. It's incredibly complicated. I've read into a lot of it. It confuses the hell out of me, and I have a vested interest in learning about it so that I can argue with you assholes. Sorry.
Well, it was interesting. So in this case, like the women in my family are all a little bit more, well, specifically my aunt. My aunt is 5'10". She's always been broader shouldered, deeper voiced, just in general, I guess what people would consider less feminine.
Mm-hmm.
So she did a lot of reading about testosterone during birth. Yep. And what effects it has on the body. And I'm like, just like when you look at the science of like gender in child, like in conception, it's kind of the same thing. So like my body, I don't think would house a female child. Like my chemical molecular makeup isn't going to allow that. For whatever reason, I'm too acidic and female sperm don't live in me long enough to fertilize the egg. Like if you've read enough on it, that's what it says. And I'm like, well, it can't be as easy as that. But honestly, I've had 2 boys, so I can't generalize it any other way than the experience, but thinking a lot of other things must come into play that are outside of just those 2 cells.
Oh, yeah.
There's got to be so much more that we don't even have a clue about.
Oh, yeah. Even if you want to talk on the X chromosome, you have your XX and your XY. People say, well, you have a Y chromosome, then that just means you're male, period. I was like, really? What part of it? Do you know? Because I do. It's 1 gene out of billions in that chromosome that's switched from off to on, and it's one that does not get switched until very late in development. Because bit of trivia, doctors are wrong almost 1/4 of the time when they look at x-rays and try to determine what your baby is, because we all actually have the same parts in utero. They just form in slightly different configurations. People do not know that. They don't understand that what becomes testicles is the same thing, the same material that is your ovaries. There again, one out of 4, a doctor will look and say, "Oh, I see a penis." Yeah, newsflash, that was not what you thought it was when that baby comes out. And there is recorded information that it comes. I think it's 1 in 400 people are born with some degree of intersex characteristics, and an awful lot of that get changed surgically at birth, sometimes by the doctor's decree. Yeah. They make a decision right then and there and they make biological changes to that child's body, and then that child starts to grow up, and oops, that's where representation comes in very, very useful, because I know this is the case with a lot of people when it comes to sexual orientation. They don't have a word for it until they see an example. You know, you see something that makes you, you know, if you're a lesbian, sometimes you don't have the words to describe that until you see an example of it. Something in media, something out in the world. You need to see that and go, that's me. Be it gay, bisexual, lesbian, pansexual, asexual. You know, I mean, if you're asexual and you have no sexual drive whatsoever, you think of yourself as a mutant freak until you see something else presented as normal for that person. That's why, and that's one of the things with the comic that I've learned, bringing it back to what we're actually here for. Because I told you I could ramble. The comic and my life in general, like tonight, when I'm done with the podcast and I have some lunch, Heidi and I are going out to dinner, and then we're going to a local karaoke bar to hang out with friends and sing. That's what we do. And we'll probably go out someplace for dinner before that. I have massive social anxiety issues that I work very, very hard to overcome in order to do what I want to do, which is I want to go out to eat. I want to leave the house. And actually, there's a Green Lantern comic, and I always quote this. It was from the Darkest Night story, I think, or the Spectrum War. I'm not sure, but was Sinestro giving Hal crap about being fearless, and Hal is like, you never understood. You never got it. Being a Green Lantern isn't about being fearless. It's about conquering fear every day. It's about facing it and working through it every time it happens. So that's how I deal with my anxiety issues. I deal with them on the knowledge, no, it's never going to go away, but the more I deal with it, the more I put myself out there, leave the house and face those situations. You know, when I need to go to the bathroom these days, I just go to the bathroom. Now, I have situational awareness. You know, I always go with my purse, so I have my phone with me, and I can call for help if Heidi's with me or whatever. I have my photo ID that has my gender on it, because I did a lot of goddamn paperwork. I am not carrying that fucker with me everywhere I go.
Yeah,
I chronicled the paperwork in the strip. So I like, you know, I don't. Heidi's the one who pointed it out to me, but it's true. You know, we live our lives very out loud as just normal people. And we live in a very, very small, Western Pennsylvania, very much red state town. But it's so small that people are actually I found people are more reluctant to give me crap here than if we had still lived in Tampa, where you can be anonymous. Because the person who's going to give me a shitty glare and say crap to me at the karaoke bar or at the buffet, I'm going to see them tomorrow at the gas station. And then 2 days from now, I'm going to bump into them in the supermarket, because this small town is way too small to not see the same people over and over again. And as a result, a lot of people have a tendency to be a little bit less douchey, because they know that there are consequences. And plus, everyone in this town likes Heidi. And so we're very popular. That comes in really handy. When you go into a restaurant, they know us because we tip nice and we're not jerks. So if somebody in a restaurant I've seen this happen a lot. We'll go into a restaurant and you'll see somebody staring at me in that shitty, and then the entire staff goes, "Oh, Heidi and D, hi, you want to sit in our section?" Yeah, when the entire wait staff of a restaurant is being super nice to you, amazingly, all those stares go away, because they know no one's going to have their back.
Yeah.
But yeah, the comic is that too. The comic very quickly became, yes, it's still very much about making points about transgender life. This week's strip is where I'm going gray. It doesn't really show up under the light, but my roots here are all gray, kind of silvery. I stopped dyeing my hair last year. I'm like, I'm just going to let it grow out. Fuck it. But in the strip, I made a joke about it, but I also made the point of saying, I've only been out less than a decade. I'm just now finally getting to live as a girl. I'm not ready to be an old lady yet. And a lot of people looked at that and are like, yeah, because a lot of our lives are lived making up for lost time. That's why a lot of us are like, hi, I'm 45 years old and I'm dressing like it's 1985 and I'm going to prom. Fuck you. We didn't get to do that. But but the comic is representation as well, you know. And even though it's got a little warning on it that says, usually it says contains naughty words, because that's the worst it gets. As terms of adult language, is that's it. Nothing, you know. You're never going to see graphic sex. You're never going to see my junk in the strip. You'll see me on the toilet because that's funny, but you'll never see anything that's particularly risque in that regard. It's not that kind of comic strip, but it's a comic strip where I drop F-bombs, so I put a little warning there. But by and large, the whole point of most of the strips is just about, this is just me living my life. That's it. And it's normal. Our lives are boring. We go to the store, we share cat memes on Facebook, you know, we argue over the bills. But I've come to understand in the interactions people have with me, you know, I'm just trying to make this comic strip and like, oh, I'll do this funny thing and make a little personal therapy out of it. But then I get these comments back, you know, of people pointing out that, you know, this is helping them deal with their own issues, dealing with their own stuff. I know for a fact that when I came out in 2016, I knew of a grand total of no one in this town that was an out transgender person, and I have lost count of how many people have come out. And I do honestly think, and maybe I'm being arrogant, but the fact that we're everywhere, we had memberships at the YMCA, and we'd use the pool, and we would do all these things and be seen and be part of the community. We're on council, the art council, and stuff like that. It's important. It's important to be seen. It's important to have that representation, you know. With the Marvel movies, it's important for, you know, for the character with She-Hulk, that she can be confident and she can have control over her anger, and she can also have a healthy sex life and the desire to do so and not have that held against her too. Mm-hmm. You know, you can have Carol as Captain Marvel, you know, having to strive against all the preconceptions against her throughout that entire movie, being held back from being what she could be until she finally, you know, accepts that and reaches that potential. But she doesn't have to do so in a bikini. I think that's one of the reasons that nobody really complained about Black Widow being overly competent and snarky, is because they sold her to us through sex first. She was sold to us as a sex symbol that could kick ass, and that's a male fantasy.
Yeah. Well, you can blame Joss Whedon for that.
Pardon?
I said you can blame Joss Whedon for that because he introduced that character.
But I don't think that we should.
That was Favreau in Iron Man 2.
I don't think we should blame anybody for that, though. I think we should harness it and say, you know what? Scarlett Johansson does an awesome job at being both as vulnerable as an assassin can be, and as kick-ass as any girl should ever aspire to be.
Yep. And she got to finally rewrite the way that character was presented over the years as a rounded character,
mm-hmm.
you know, and step away from the early stuff she was forced to do, which was, you know, I'm going to unzip my spy outfit down to here.
Yeah.
And then they got to make fun of her butt posing.
Her sister in the Black Widow movie, you know, it's like always talk about the superhero pose and
get a pose on. I loved that. They got to make fun of her earlier appearances where she was constantly sticking her butt out because the studio was like, we have to make sure you're sexy and in the background. And it's a pity. And the newer characters that are being introduced, you know, are pushing against that and getting pushback from the fans as a result. They don't want to see that. They want, you know, you can have the character be an assertive, strong female character just so long as she's also something that they can masturbate to.
Yeah. Hey, Sarah, can you go ahead and in the private chat drop me the link to the Kickstarter so I can put it in the comments?
You know how annoying it is, though? Like, speaking as like a woman who also feels like inspired by women that are kick-ass, like I would prefer Like, this is my whole thing. Like, I am not like, I love men. Don't get me wrong. I do. You know, married together for like ever. But what draws me to a man is not what's in his pants. And what draws me to a woman is not what's in her bra. So for me, like, just in general, I'm thinking, shouldn't, like, I could potentially be attracted to all of those things about everything. Like, the sexiest parts of a man is his shoulders and his back. Like, I don't know. I prefer to see all of that as opposed to this thing. Like, I'm just saying, like, it's just not the most attractive part of a man. It's not my thing. I like all of the other things. Like, I don't know.
Well, we all have the things that we find the more attractive than not.
And I'm just not, like, for me, I love women. I always have. But I think in a way I'm like, well, if I wouldn't be interested in them with their clothes on, then I wouldn't only be interested in them with their clothes off. Like, those things go together for me. Like, I have to be emotionally and mentally and all other things stimulated by another person, I guess. You know what I mean? Is that what demisexual means? Whatever it is. I don't know. I just prefer to, like, enjoy people.
Yeah. And there is a phrase for that, and I do not know what that one is. I'm bad about some of the newer labels that have been gaining prominence over the last few years, which you'd think I should be labels. Fantastic at it, but no, I am terrible at it, and I will own that. You know, for me, it's always been, you know, there are certain physical attributes that I find attractive in women and certain physical attributes I find attractive in men, but my attraction is always to the person first.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and then other things are all secondary. I mean, even like with
it all changes.
Even with straight people, I think it's kind of the same thing. I mean, you have to be attracted to that person, but then there's like other things. So this just shows we're all the same.
I feel like what attracts some people, others, like what I love about Captain Marvel is what other people hate. And the montage of her getting up every time, that resonated with me.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It was like, this is my fucking life. Like, this is everything that I've worked so hard to still be standing here. Like, like I died.
That was one of the best
full on, like, cry
cinematic
my eyes out. But
montages in a movie, like, ever. I think
that one, and then so Brian, I'm not into zombies, but Brian made me watch The Last of Us, and I never played the game. But
I'm not a zombie fan either, and I'm dying to see that show just for that third episode.
He said, just be ready. He's like, just be ready for the third episode. They said it's the most, like, heartbreaking episode ever. And so I'm watching it, and I'm like, I'm good about 7 minutes in. And then I realized that this guy was going to be the guy that changed his life. And I sobbed through this entire episode. It didn't matter that they were gay men. It mattered that this love was so strong and so real. Like, it wasn't fake. It was like this. I really don't like the fact that you're bringing people into our circle. Like, I don't trust these people. I don't trust. They got to be themselves. And that was part of what being with another person is. Like that, like, I can be really upset that we're sitting at the grocery store for 20 minutes because he's having a conversation with somebody. And I'm like, I'm going to go home and take my shoes off. Like, can we go? And he is just chatting it up, and this is what he lives for. And I'm like,
you're the me in the relationship, and Brian is the Heidi.
I'm like, can we just go now, please? Like, I've been out all day. I just want to go home.
And speaking of all day, I didn't mean to have this episode go longer, but I think we've been having a good conversation here. We would love to have you guys back again, just to do this again.
Yeah, anytime.
Whatever. Like, Just because
Anytime.
I think the more people can see how similar lives are, the more we understand what really binds us as humans. Like,
Yep.
I don't think it matters, you know, what we do in the privacy of our own home. It's how we treat people and how those things matter to other people and how you make them feel and how, you know, an open a conversation we can have. Because I've one of my very most favorite students is trans, and he said, it causes a lot of problems. He said, so I'm just going to go to the clinic and go to the bathroom. I said, you have to walk all the way to the clinic when I have a single stall bathroom in here. You don't have to walk all the way there. It's a single stall bathroom. There's no, just go, because you're just going to the bathroom.
Yep.
Like, it's okay. And he was just adamant that he really felt more comfortable doing it. I said, all right, I have absolutely no problem with it. Just hurry back, you know?
And I unfortunately got to say, I understand that fear, because I have been called out by women in this. There's this one karaoke bar we used to go to, and I came out of a single stall, locked door bathroom, single occupancy, and was met by a woman staring at me saying, "Oh, hell no, fuck that shit." She went to the bar. She went to the bar owner to complain.
I think
how dare I go in that room?
My kids are really weird about it, because like in our little vestibule, there's a girl's bathroom and a boy's bathroom, but they have exactly the same thing. And so my kids, one of the girls will come out of the girls' restroom and I'll come out of the boys, and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I had to pee. Like, I'm 40 and I've had 2 kids. Like, I just had to pee. If there's a toilet and a sink, like, that's all I needed. Like, I don't need anything else. So just let me pee. I don't care if the little sign says boy, but it's one stall. Like, yeah. I don't even, I don't care, because I had to pee. Like,
why are they even labeled if they're single stalled and identical?
Why
are any why if at the bar, why was it labeled men's and women's if they're the same thing? Like, they have the same stuff in them. Like, maybe there's the addition of a urinal, and that's the only thing I can think of that could possibly be different in a single stall bathroom.
No, trust me, in a bar, yeah, there can be massive differences. I would never have gone into the other bathroom in that bar, and thankfully we were friends with the owner. So the owner told her she could go fuck herself. That's the bathroom I'm going to use. And I was told in no uncertain terms, look, that's the ladies' room. You're a lady. Go to that bathroom. You do not need to be going into a room where there is a pee trough.
Yeah.
Because
I'm more of a, like, single stalls. Like, I don't care about there being a urinal in there. I care about, like, they should be labeled, like, can you hit the toilet, or will you not pay attention? Like, if you're gonna piss on the floor, this is the bathroom for you. If you're a clean person who's gonna, not make a mess or clean it up well after you make it, like, then you go in this bathroom. But that's like there's gross or not gross people.
There's a local place that only has one bathroom. It's just labeled restroom. And there's a sign over the toilet. We don't care how you pee, just hit the target.
So Katie's definitely our people. I've been reading.
This is
exactly, yes.
We all gotta pee.
Don't pee on the seat.
Yep. And that's Katie. That's the colorist of the book, and she is awesome.
Well, she definitely has to reach out to me privately. I would love a friend request from her.
It was funny because, like, the boys, like, because I go in both bathrooms, and because I gotta pee, and I'm not waiting for anybody. 1, because I have kids coming in my room, and 2, because I just have to pee. So I would tell the kids, I'm like, look, if you're a boy and you go in the room, you close the door, you stand close enough to aim inside the bowl. And ladies, don't hover, because you can sit. Because if you sprinkle when you tinkle, then you need to be a sweetie and wipe the seatie, because I'm not bathing in your pee. Like, come on. It's like, it's just about being neat. It's just about being, courteous of the people around you. I don't, you're all going to pee. So let's just be peeing in a nice sanitary place. Well, as sanitary as a bathroom can be, but, like, just be clean.
And that's like we've all accidentally missed the seat before, or missed the toilet and hit the seat before. And, like, that happens. That's where I'm saying, like, I don't care if you go into the bathroom. I don't care what what you're doing when you're in there. I don't care who you are, but if you if you pee on the seat, if you make a mess, clean it up, and then I don't care. I don't care.
Yeah.
And on that note, I'm going to thank you guys for joining. But where can people find you guys on social media?
Sarah?
Unlikely Hero Studios is we're at uhstudios.com, and on social media we're at uhstudios pretty much everywhere. I think Instagram is at uhstudios official. And I don't even remember but like it's either at uhstudios or at Unlikely Hero Studios. And the Kickstarter you can find at uhstudios.com/kickit2, and that is the number 2. And then it'll take you straight to the Kickstarter.
That's awesome. You guys do some great stuff over there. And Dee, where can people find you on social media?
On most social medias, I'm either just D Fish or D Brisby Fish. And easy to determine if you're looking for the right D. If my profile picture is a cartoon, my cartoon, the cartoon D, I always use one version of it for my profile pictures. So that's the easiest way. It's D Fish or D Brisby Fish. The webcomic can be read every Wednesday at findingd.com or findingdcomic.com. I had to get the second URL because Facebook, for some reason, has flagged findingd.com as spam.
Ugh.
I think I pissed somebody off and they reported me for something.
All right, so I'm gonna run a quick commercial and then our show outro, and then I'll end the show and then we'll say our formal goodbyes then. But it's been lovely having both of you on. Like I said, you're welcome back to just do what we were just doing now. This was fun. So
awesome. Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Famous Faces and Funnies in Melbourne, Florida is leading the way in pop culture fun. From comic books and graphic novels to Funko Pops and collector's items, Famous Faces and Funnies has it all. Rick Shea and the professional team at Famous Faces and Funnies are friendly and knowledgeable. Whether you're looking for toys, props, collector treasures, or a new comic book, Famous Faces and Funnies is your one-stop shop. To find Famous Faces and Funnies on Facebook and Twitter, just type at FFF Comics.
And as we do every Saturday, it's time to ring that bell.